Now, the BBC news presenter and Mastermind host Clive Myrie criticised GB News this week by sharing an article in The Guardian, the BBC's unofficial in-house newsletter, citing an unbalanced report from the Muslim Council of Britain, saying that this channel, GB News, spent too much time covering Muslim content. Now, Clive Myrie is an outstanding journalist and broadcaster, and I've got no doubt a very nice man. But what a privileged and lofty position Mr. Myrie is in, working for the national state broadcaster, pulling in over £300,000 a year, and being part of an organisation that faces zero commercial pressure or pressure to get ratings. So Clive Myrie can sit there in his ivory tower, lambasting a small media startup like this one, whilst his monthly salary and gold-plated pension remain assured, courtesy of grannies who face jail if they don't cough up the £169.50 for the BBC licence fee as they shiver in their living rooms. But I'll be fair about this. On any issue, I always try to look at both sides. And perhaps Clive Myrie has a point about the stories that we cover on this channel. Maybe we should focus more on stories like this. Clive Myrie apologises for failing to declare at least £145,000 in outside earnings. Amazing, isn't it? Pulling in 300 grand from the state, plus an extra unstated sum to present Mastermind. None of that is enough. Yes, let's use the taxpayer-funded platform of the BBC to promote ourselves in the private sector and pull in a few more shillings. How the other half live, eh? Now, I do a few corporates myself, and they are always a blast. Let me tell you, I am the host with the most. But should one of the faces of the BBC news operation be doing the same? A public sector journalist representing multi-million-pound enterprises. For example, how can Mr. Myrie be impartial about the financial services industry whilst hosting an event for Dutch megabank ING? How can he be impartial about interest rates or economic policy as host of the Intermediary Mortgage Lenders Association lunch? How can he be impartial about housing reform whilst taking a handsome fee from the National Residential Landlords Association? How, I pray, can he be impartial about climate change policies as chair of a debate at Green Talks Live, which champions net zero? Here's what the big man had to say when the story about his extracurricular activities broke. On X, he wrote an apology. I've had several administrative issues, and I didn't fill out the correct paperwork for some of my external public events, so they haven't been published until now. I've told the BBC I won't be taking part in any more paid external events in the foreseeable future, beyond a handful of pre-existing commitments, so that this doesn't happen again. My sincere apologies. Thanks, Clive. Thanks, Clive. Now, with regard to the Guardian article that Mr. Myrie shared about this place's coverage around Muslim issues, let me tell you what I think. There are millions of British Muslims, the vast majority of whom are our treasured neighbours, our friends, our brothers and sisters, our colleagues, our lovers, and they are British, and they are as British as anyone else, and they are viewers and listeners to this show. But are we not allowed to talk about Pakistani Muslim rape gangs who exploited a generation of vulnerable young girls? Or Islamic extremists who make up the vast majority of terror suspects on the security services watch list? Can we not talk about 7/7, Manchester Arena or London Bridge? All examples of Muslim extremists killing innocent British citizens with endless similar plots thwarted on a daily basis. Are we not allowed to talk about armed cops at Christmas markets? After all, it's not the Quakers, is it? Or the First Day Adventists threatening to drive a 4x4 into the assembled crowd? And what about those weekly so-called peace marches in which the rule of law has been jeopardised with pro-Hamas extremists chanting Nazi slogans calling for the elimination of Israel and projecting anti-Semitic tropes onto Big Ben, the very home of our democracy? Are we not allowed to talk about local clerics hounding out a Batley school teacher from his job for showing an image of the Prophet Muhammad? That man is still on the run and still in fear for his life with his family. Well, the Beeb won't talk about it, but I will. So you do your job, Clive, and I'll do mine. I'm not surprised that Mr. Myrie sent this post about GB News, because it seems to me that these establishment figures are absolutely obsessed with us. And of course, they would love us to go away. Radio 4's Nick Robinson has been moaning about our presenter lineup and our editorial content. Plus, he's been joking about our small audience, which, as you well know, is not small anymore. And we are even living rent-free in Have I Got News for You star Ian Hislop's head. Take a listen.
You can't just say you've selected the audience. You've got no evidence for that, no proof. It's just this isn't GB News.
They're obsessed with us. It's like Tourette's, and it makes me very happy. So, Mr. Myrie, whilst I am a big fan of your work, I'm delighted to say that you don't decide what we talk about here on GB News. Our viewers and listeners decide, and they are growing in number. We won't go away. We won't be quiet. We won't shut up. And if you think that I, for one, will be cowed into avoiding any topic on this show, then you're no mastermind, just a pointless celebrity. Look, I'm a huge fan of Clive Myrie. Lovely guy, great broadcaster. I watch him all the time. Whisper it. I like the BBC, but I think he was wrong to share that article from The Guardian. He's supposed to be impartial. He's effectively attacking a rival that is fighting for its very survival with an ad boycott and everything else. But we will win. And do you know why we're going to win? Because we got you, babe. That's right. Our viewers and listeners, you are the ones keeping the space going and helping us go from strength to strength. Speaking of strength, let's get tonight's top pundits. I'm delighted to welcome Sir Michael Fabricant, Edwina Curry and Andy Williams. Great to see all three of you. Look, I better bomb across the studio there. I'm not getting any fitter or any younger. Where do you start? Michael, your background is in broadcasting, isn't it? And then politics, and then, hey, you're back on telly again. Mr. Myrie, your verdict?
Well, I mean, one of the golden rules in politics, or not politics, but in broadcasting, is you don't mention your rivals. It's extraordinary that Nick Robinson, as you said, and Clive Myrie obsess about GB News. And they go on and on and on about it. I've had late-night texts, very late-night texts from Nick Robinson in the past over this sort of...
Just texts?
Just text.
Right.
Over this, yes, you didn't ring me up, thank God. No. But anyway, this sort of issue, it wasn't GB News, but a similar
or anything like that. I only check because it's the BBC. You can't be too careful.
Well, quite. But the point is, why are they doing it? They're doing it because they're frit. They're actually nervous about GB News' growing audience. And it's very worrying for the GB News who spend, in my opinion, quite rightly, because, you know, they're an international broadcaster. Although, incidentally, I pick up GB News in Spain and America on my iPad.
That's wonderful.
But the point is that GB News is now beginning to take the audience away from the BBC News Channel and Sky. It is becoming the major news outlet on television in the UK. And a growing audience, of course, with GB News Radio. And they're worried. And, of course, they're worried about the licence fee. And they recognise there's a very, very real problem with the silent majority out there who aren't the let's rejoin the EU, who aren't the we believe the left is always right, who aren't the whatever we do, we don't talk about Muslim extremism, which, as you quite rightly pointed out, is a minority, but nevertheless it is existing. And GB News is making waves where the BBC aren't. And there are real questions being asked in the corporation now about whither goest BBC News. How comes they're losing out so badly? As I said, they're frit, and that's why they're mentioning it.
Quick follow-up. Who taught you the word frit? Is that street slang? Even I don't know that.
No, it was Margaret Thatcher, wasn't it? Margaret
right?
Thatcher said, "You're frit."
Is that a fact?
Yeah.
All right, well, listen, you're never frit, are you, Edwina? And, of course, you worked at the BBC very successfully, Radio 5 Live. You had one of the really big late-night shows there over the weekend. What's your verdict on your former colleague?
I think the BBC is up its own whatever and has been for a long, long time. It treats people with a great deal of arrogance. You find, for example, if you're on one of the main news programmes that you have a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. If people like Amal Raja are on, they do most of the talking.
Yes.
Whereas the great thing about GB News, and I mean this, I wouldn't be here otherwise, is that we have a proper opportunity to discuss. Our views are treated with respect, whatever they are. There's a real effort to have a panel that covers a range of views, and we can articulate in exactly the way that we want. And this is one of the big battlegrounds against woke. And woke is what's delivered us. David Lammy is our Foreign Secretary, who doesn't know the difference between Libya and Lebanon, for example. But more seriously, woke is what has delivered us dead children, like the case that we had last week, which was so tragic.
But because of cultural sensitivities, not investigating red flag cases.
The suggestion is that you don't want to upset anybody. You're a social worker. You're doing your best, but you don't want to lose your job because someone complains that you're being racist when you're not, when you're trying to protect a child. Wokeism has led to rape teenagers, and you mentioned, not just in one place in the country, but in a number of different places. And wokeism doesn't treat people equally. That's the key thing in our society. It leads to real injustice.
And it divides us, and that's a terrible thing. Andy...
But can I just say, isn't it ironic, given that you were making the point that we are a balanced audience here, or a balanced panel, that Ofcom spend all their effort attacking GB News and not the BBC?
You know what? I don't have to say this. I don't have to say this. I think Ofcom are very fair, OK? And I think they've got a hard job to do. And we're lucky to have Ofcom, because if you didn't have Ofcom, it's America. And the news channels in America are now so polarised to the point where they're as bad as each other. So I'm going to lose a lot of fans by actually defending the work of Ofcom.
Like
there you go.
You're bidding for the job of chairman.
Do you know what I'll do? I'll do the Ofcom Christmas party. Because,
Don't you think the BBC are biased?
I think, I think the BBC get sense here as well. They get their Ofcom investigations. But listen, Andy, we can come back to that if you like. Andy, Clive Myrie is entitled to have a view, and he's entitled to worry about a sense in some quarters of growing Islamophobia within UK media.
Is he entitled to?
Well, he probably is entitled to that view.
Of course he's entitled to that view. I mean, I don't think he should have posted that tweet, because it's created this 15-minute segment, this row that was completely unnecessary.
Does he not have free speech to send that tweet?
Well, he does have free speech, but he also has a job which requires him to be impartial. I'm a big fan of Clive Myrie, as you said. I think he's an outstanding broadcaster. I know he sort of failed to declare these payments, and I actually think that's a bit of a storm in a...
Administrative problem.
Administrative problems. Bit of a storm in it. Yeah, he needs some comm support with that statement. Bit of a storm in it. No. But
that story, there was nothing untoward. It was clearly he messed up and he's apologised.
If an MP did it, we'd be thrown out of the House of Commons.
No, you'd be censured just like he has, which is he apologises and you move on.
But has he been censured?
Well, yeah,
You could actually be fined as a member of Parliament, so he got off light.
Well, I mean,
let's
not go down that road. There are plenty of MPs who've done all sorts of dodgy things with money, so let's not.
I feel
and suffered as a consequence.
That strikes me as an oversight, but not the end of the world. But anyway, go on.
Well, no, but I mean, I do think it's at odds with his role as the host of the News at 10. You do have to exercise impartiality. This is where Gary Lineker's got into trouble. There's a difficulty with where you find that line, and again, that's where Lineker struggles.
But the impartiality actually means not expressing an opinion.
A view, yeah.
And that has to be a self-imposed discipline, that if you're going to be impartial, you cannot have anybody listening to you or anyone on your programme thinking they're actually going to take one side or the other. It's not fair, apart from that.
And the point that you made, Mark, actually, it's not whether or not he's biased because he hosted various things for money. It's a perception that he might be biased. Newsreaders should be seen to be neutral and believed to be neutral.
And the BBC go out of their way to maintain that balance. They work so hard to maintain the balance that actually I think it causes them more problems than otherwise.
OK.